Welcome to the Fresno City College Psychology Department's video tutorial on explaining statistical significance without statistics. The purpose of this video is simply to help you understand what it means in a very general way when researchers use the phrase statistical significance. This is not a statistics video tutorial. We will not discuss p-value, the null hypothesis, alpha level, critical value, statistical power, or any of that math stuff. Personally, I actually like the math stuff, but that is outside the scope of what I want you to get out of this video. What I do want you to understand is what it is to say that statistical significance means results are not likely due to chance alone. What I do not want is for you to simply memorize that definition. I want you to understand it in such a way that you could explain what it means in your own words. In order to help you with that, I am going to provide you with a detailed example. Let's take a look at a published study from 2010 that should resonate with you. And Associates explored the impact of cell phone rings on academic performance. They had two hypotheses. Cell phone ringing impairs test performance, and cell phone ringing disrupts note-taking. In a nutshell, let me explain what they actually did to gather evidence to test their hypotheses. They started with 71 volunteers for the experiment who were college students in an introductory psychology class. They told them that they were studying note-taking. They randomly assigned half of them to the cell phone ringing group and half to the no cell phone ringing group. This means that each participant had an equal chance of being placed in either group. Then, both groups watched a video lecture and were told to take notes. Those in the cell phone ringing group had the video lecture disrupted by a cell phone ringing on two separate occasions. Those in the no cell phone ringing group were able to watch the video lecture with no cell phone disruptions. Immediately following the video, students were given a multiple-choice test over the video lecture material. Two of the test items assessed lecture content that corresponded with the cell phone ringing. Since instructors do not typically test students immediately following a lecture, but rather they allow students to go home and study, the researchers also collected the notes to see if the lecture content that corresponded with the cell phone ringing would be present in their notes. Here are the results. You can see that overall the participants in the cell phone ringing group performed worse on the disrupted test items and were less likely to include the disrupted information in their notes than the participants in the no cell phone ringing group. They did not just perform worse, they performed significantly worse. That is, there was a statistically significant difference between the groups for all four academic tasks that were measured. Statistical significance means these results are not likely due to chance alone. So, now we are finally back to the point of this video. What does that even mean? I promise we will get to that soon. First, let's look more closely at the actual data, the numbers. For test item number 1, close to 95% of the students in the no cell phone ringing group correctly answered that question, but only about 69% of the students in the cell phone ringing group were able to answer it correctly. For test item number 2, close to 80% of the students in the no cell phone ringing group correctly answered that question, but only 50% of the students in the cell phone ringing group were able to answer it correctly. Just looking at these data, I am guessing that test item number 2 was a more difficult question than test item number 1. It also just looks at face value that the cell phone ringing did interfere with the student's ability to master that lecture content. For test item number 1, close to 80% of the students in the no cell phone ringing group included something in their notes about that content, but only about 53% of the students in the cell phone ringing group included anything in their notes about it. For test item number 2, about 82% of the students in the no cell phone ringing group included something in their notes, but only about 44% of the students in the cell phone ringing group did. Just looking at these data, it appears that even if the students were given time to study their notes, the students in this cell phone ringing group would be at a disadvantage. If the data looked like this, exactly the same percent of students in the no cell phone group and the cell phone ringing group got both test items correct, then we would be very surprised. Just by chance alone, the percentage in each group that gets each test item right is going to be at least somewhat different. Therefore, we always expect to see a difference just by chance. That is, not having to do with the variables identified in the research at all. So the question is, when is the difference significant, and what exactly does significant mean? I have previously defined statistical significance as when the research results are not likely due to chance alone. Another way of saying that is that statistical significance is mathematical evidence that there is a low probability of getting a difference that large or larger. In other words, the difference is probably due to the variables in question and not just due to chance. Let's contrast this definition with some common definitions, or ways that we use the word significant. Oftentimes, when we say that something is significant, we mean that it was large, important, serious, or extraordinary in some way. It is very crucial that you understand that statistically significant results are not necessarily large, important, serious, nor extraordinary. The part of the definition that says a difference that large or larger does not necessarily mean large. It means large enough, which might actually be quite small. How large does the difference have to be? Well, how large is large enough depends on the sample size. With a small number of people in each group, the difference needs to be fairly large, because just one extreme score can make a huge difference. With a large number of people in each group, one extreme score will not make much difference. So the larger the groups, the smaller the difference needs to be in order to be statistically significant. This is where the math comes in. But remember, we are not going to get into the math. The End and Associates experiment included 71 participants. They got statistically significant results for all 4 academic tasks measured: correctly answering test items 1 and 2, and presence of lecture content for notes for test items 1 and 2. Does this prove or provide proof that cell phone rings impair test performance and disrupt note-taking? No, we do not say that this proves or provides proof. We would say that this provides evidence that cell phones in the classroom can impair test performance and disrupt note-taking for most students. Statistics provides us with the tools to evaluate the evidence and assert a position based on that evidence with a certain degree of confidence. But there is a saying in research that statistics means never having to say you're certain. There is always a probability that the differences measured were due to chance. This is the nature of research. This concludes the Fresno City College Psychology Department's video tutorial on explaining statistical significance without statistics. You now have a beginning understanding of what it means to say that research results are statistically significant. The more you learn about the math, the more you'll have a deeper understanding and appreciation of mathematical evidence. Until then, at least consider putting your cell phone away and on silent during class.